Picture this. A quarterback so talented he could thread a needle blindfolded, so arrogant he'd probably mansplain football to Vince Lombardi's ghost, and so controversial that he managed to make the NFL, a league that once employed actual criminals, desperately wish he'd just shut up and throw the ball. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Aaron Rodgers, the man who proved you can be simultaneously one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time and one of the most insufferable human beings to ever wear shoulder pads. But here's the kicker. This isn't just another story about a talented athlete gone rogue. This is about how the most controlling sports league in America found itself completely powerless against a guy who discovered that having a Hall of Fame arm gives you a pretty decent platform to say whatever the hell you want. And oh boy, did he have things to say. Aaron Charles Rodgers wasn't supposed to be this complicated. Born in Chico, California, he was just another kid with big dreams and a rocket arm, attending Butte Community College because, and here's the beautiful irony, no major program wanted him. The University of California eventually took a chance on this nobody from nowhere, probably thinking, hey, what's the worst that could happen? It would be a lot. At Cal, Rodgers was actually likable. Shocking, I know. He was the scrappy underdog, the overlooked talent who could make throws that defied physics. He set records, he won games, and he did it all with the kind of chip on his shoulder that makes for great sports movies. The 2005 NFL Draft was supposed to be his coronation. Everyone knew he was going first overall to the San Francisco 49ers. It was destiny. It was poetry. It was not happening. The 49ers took Alex Smith instead, and Rodgers sat in that green room for what felt like an eternity, his face becoming the perfect meme template for disappointment. 20 years before memes were even a thing. 23 picks later, Green Bay finally called his name. Can you imagine the audacity? Making Aaron Rodgers wait? Don't they know who he thinks he is? But here's where the story gets interesting, because falling to Green Bay wasn't just a blessing in disguise. It was like winning the lottery while getting struck by lightning during a solar eclipse. The Packers had this guy named Brett Favre, and Brett Favre had this little problem called not knowing when to retire. So Rodgers got to sit, learn, and develop that particular brand of confidence that comes from knowing you're better than the legend in front of you, but having to pretend you're grateful for the opportunity. When Favre finally mercifully decided to stay retired in 2008, after the most dramatic will he won't he saga since Ross and Rachel, Rodgers stepped into the spotlight. And wouldn't you know it, the kid could play. Like, really play. We're talking about a quarterback who could make throws that looked like they violated several laws of physics and at least one commandment. His first few seasons were solid, but 2010? That was when Aaron Rodgers announced to the world, oh, you thought Brett Favre was good? Hold my organic, gluten-free beer. The Packers went on a magical playoff run, and Rodgers threw for over 3,900 yards, with a touchdown-to-interception ratio that made other quarterbacks weep into their Wheaties. They won the Super Bowl, Rodgers got MVP honors, and Green Bay finally had their heir to the Lambeau throne. But winning a championship when you're young and talented and devastatingly handsome, because let's be honest, the man looks like he was carved by football gods with particularly good taste, does things to a person. It validates every belief you've ever had about your own greatness. It makes you think that maybe, just maybe, you're not just good at football. Maybe you're good at everything. The endorsement deals came flooding in. State Farm made him their golden boy, pairing him with a fictional insurance agent in commercials that were somehow both charming and insufferable. Rodgers had this everyman appeal, this aw-shucks Midwestern charm that made America fall in love with him. He was dating actresses, appearing on game shows, and generally living the kind of life that makes regular people simultaneously inspired and deeply resentful. And the football? Oh, the football was poetry in motion. Rodgers had this ability to extend plays that bordered on supernatural. He'd roll out of the pocket, defenders closing in, and somehow find a receiver 40 yards downfield through a window the size of a dinner plate. His accuracy was absurd. His arm strength was video game level ridiculous. He made the impossible look routine and the routine look effortless. By 2011, he was the NFL MVP. By 2014, he was the MVP again. The man was collecting awards like they were Pokemon cards, and Green Bay fans were convinced they'd found their quarterback for the next decade. Everything was perfect in Titletown. But perfection, as it turns out, is boring. And Aaron Rodgers was many things, but boring wasn't one of them. The first signs of trouble came not from his play, because the man could still sling a football like Zeus hurling thunderbolts, but from his mouth, and his brain, and his increasingly bizarre relationship with reality. It started small. Little comments about the media, subtle digs at teammates, the occasional conspiracy theory dropped into a radio interview like a hand grenade at a dinner party. "Oh, that's just Aaron being Aaron," people said. "He's always been a little different." Different. Sure, let's go with that. The family drama hit the tabloids like a meteor hitting Earth. Apparently, the golden boy quarterback had completely cut off his family. Parents, siblings, everyone. The details were murky, but the optics were terrible. Here's a guy making millions throwing a football, living in a mansion, dating celebrities, and he won't even talk to his own mother? The same mother who probably drove him to countless practices and games when he was just another kid with a dream? But Rodgers had an explanation for everything. He always did. The family was toxic. They were using him. They didn't understand the pressures he faced. It was everyone else's fault, never his. This became a pattern that, if you were paying attention, told you everything you needed to know about who Aaron Rodgers really was. Then came the playoff failures. Oh, the playoff failures. For all his regular season greatness, Rodgers developed this nasty habit of coming up small when it mattered most. The 2014 NFC Championship game against Seattle. Don't even get me started. The Packers were up 19-7 with 5 minutes left, and they found a way to lose. Rodgers threw an interception in overtime that basically gift-wrapped a Super Bowl appearance for the Seahawks. But was it his fault? Of course not. It was the defense. It was the coaching. It was the receivers not running the right routes. It was everyone and everything except the guy who threw the ball directly to a Seattle defender when his team needed him most. This, too, became a pattern. If you thought Aaron Rodgers was going to handle adversity with grace and humility, well, you clearly haven't been paying attention. Instead of introspection, he doubled down on being the smartest guy in every room he entered. And when you combine supreme athletic talent with an unshakable belief in your own intellectual superiority, you get whatever the hell Aaron Rodgers became. The conspiracy theories started flowing like wine at a wedding. COVID vaccines? Don't trust them. The media? They're all out to get him. The NFL? They're trying to silence him. Government? Don't even get him started. Rodgers had apparently done his research. And by research, he meant spending time on websites that make your racist uncle's Facebook posts look like peer-reviewed scientific journals. But here's the thing about being really, really good at football. It buys you a platform. Networks want to interview you. Podcasts want you as a guest. People hang on your every word because you can throw a spiral 60 yards on a rope. And Rodgers used that platform to share his unique worldview with anyone willing to listen. The COVID situation was where things really went off the rails. When asked if he was vaccinated, Rodgers said he was immunized. Cute, right? Clever wordplay from a clever guy. Except he wasn't vaccinated at all. He'd received some alternative treatment that probably involved crystals and positive thinking. When he inevitably caught COVID and had to miss a game, the truth came out. The NFL was not amused. The media was not amused. His teammates, who actually did get vaccinated and follow protocols, were definitely not amused. But Rodgers, he was the victim here. Always the victim. The league was persecuting him for his beliefs. The media was conducting a witch hunt. He was just a free thinker in a world of sheep. By this point, the relationship between Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers had become more dysfunctional than a reality TV show. The organization that had treated him like royalty for over a decade was suddenly dealing with a quarterback who seemed more interested in being a martyr than winning football games. The 2021 season was peak Rodgers chaos. He showed up to training camp with a massive chip on his shoulder, convinced that the Packers didn't appreciate him enough, didn't pay him enough, didn't worship at the altar of his greatness with sufficient enthusiasm. He wanted out. He wanted a trade. He wanted respect. And you know what? He played like a man possessed. MVP numbers again. Absolutely ridiculous statistical dominance. The Packers went 13-4 and earned the #1 seed in the NFC. Everything was set up perfectly for a Super Bowl run. This was his chance to prove all the doubters wrong, to show that he was still elite, to cement his legacy among the all-time greats. Naturally, they lost their first playoff game at home to the 49ers, because of course they did. Rodgers threw for barely 200 yards and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. The same guy who spent all season talking about how great he was disappeared when it mattered most. Again. But the real drama came after the season, when Rodgers decided to hold the entire organization hostage with his retirement decision. For months, he kept everyone guessing. Would he retire? Would he come back? Would he demand a trade? The Packers couldn't plan for the future because their supposedly elite quarterback was having an existential crisis that played out in public like the world's most expensive therapy session. Finally, mercifully, the Packers traded him to the New York Jets. A fresh start, a new beginning, a chance for Rodgers to prove that he was still the same quarterback who once terrorized NFL defenses with surgical precision and supernatural arm talent. 4 plays. That's how long Aaron Rodgers lasted as a New York Jet before tearing his Achilles tendon and ending his season. The football gods apparently have a sense of humor darker than a Tim Burton movie. All that drama, all that build-up, all that "I'm going to show everyone" energy. And it ended with him lying on the turf at MetLife Stadium, looking like he just discovered that Santa Claus wasn't real. But even from the sideline, even unable to play, Rodgers found ways to stay in the headlines. More conspiracy theories, more controversial takes, more everything is everyone else's fault commentary. The man turned being injured into a full-time career as a professional victim. So what are we left with? What is the legacy of Aaron Rodgers? On paper, it looks pretty good. Super Bowl champion, multiple MVP awards, first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the most talented quarterbacks to ever play the position. But scratch beneath the surface, and you find something much more complicated. This is a guy who had everything: talent, opportunity, support, resources, and somehow managed to make everyone around him miserable. Teammates who couldn't stand him, coaches who had to walk on eggshells, an organization that bent over backward to accommodate his every whim, only to be thanked with public criticism and trade demands. Aaron Rodgers proved that you can be incredibly gifted and incredibly small at the same time, that you can make throws that defy physics while making decisions that defy common sense, that you can be a champion on the field and a cautionary tale off it. The NFL didn't try to silence Aaron Rodgers because they were afraid of his talent. They were afraid of what happened when that talent was paired with a personality so toxic it could strip paint. They were afraid of a guy who used his platform not to inspire or unite, but to divide and confuse. They were afraid of the precedent it set when their biggest stars decided that being good at sports made them experts on everything else. In the end, Aaron Rodgers got exactly what he always claimed to want: to be remembered as someone who stood apart from the crowd. Mission accomplished, Aaron. Just maybe not in the way you intended. The real tragedy isn't that Aaron Rodgers wasted his talent. He didn't. It's that he wasted the opportunity to be something more than just talented. He could have been a leader, a role model, a bridge between different kinds of people. Instead, he chose to be a cautionary tale about what happens when greatness meets ego and ego wins. But hey, at least those State Farm commercials were pretty good, right?